Hello, my name is Anna. I've been a teacher within special needs for the last 20 years, and for the last 14 have been working specifically with students with PMLD. It's over these last 14 years that I've come to learn our students have the most meaningful engagement when the staff have a little bit of wow about them. And wow is a little list of reminders that I created a couple of years ago called What's Our Why? What's your wow? How to be wow? They're all areas that are obvious and everybody generally tries to do, but at times, and it can happen to the best of us, we can forget them. However, if we can keep reminding ourselves, then our students will have meaningful engagement and a much better quality of experiences within our settings. We can have the most exciting classrooms, the best resources, really well prepared sessions, but they will mean nothing if we don't remember the very simple wow factors. So I'm going to share with you 10, I'm sure there are more, however 10 that we in my staff team like to remind ourselves of every half term, and maybe sometimes remind each other as well. It's really been noticeable the differences it can make to our students and their experiences. Here goes. Number 1, positioning. There's no point even beginning to try and engage with a student until we're confident that they are very comfortable, either sitting, standing, lying, whatever position that they are in. We need to check that they're comfortable, they've been to the bathroom, nothing's sticking into them, and that they're looking happy and content. And then you are ready to crack on with the session. So number 1 is positioning. Number 2, encourage independence. Everyone we work with is capable of being independent in all manner of different ways. So we have come to learn that within sessions such as cooking and art, it's not about the finished product. And sometimes we can forget that, and it can feel very tempting to think, oh, but we're meant to be making this beautiful picture. And there have been times in the past when maybe members of staff, without thinking, are aware of what the idea is for the session, but will start sticking bits of things in the right colour, in the right place themselves, whilst the student is just sitting next to them. And that's not really any use at all where the student is concerned. So it is really possible to get any student to join in really with art if they want to. Sometimes they might try and opt out, which isn't so easy. However, there are ways. We had one boy who could only see straight on, so we would hold the paper right in front of his face. He also much preferred to shake things that made a sound, so holding a paintbrush on its own didn't have much excitement for him. So we tied some bells to the end of his paintbrush, and he started to hear the bells ringing, and it was making him want to shake it more and more and more. He then started tapping the paper because we held the paper in front, and he realised that as he tapped the paper with the paintbrush, it made the bells ring. So he was doing it more and more and more. It was then that he noticed he was making marks on the paper. So he was really looking at the marks on the paper, and he could hear the bells, and he was fully interacting. By the end, he had a beautiful sheet of his own artwork, which we were able to send home, and it was really valued, and it was his own work, no member of staff work. It was really lovely. So that is something that can sometimes be forgotten, which also applies to other sessions like cooking. So sometimes it might be like, oh no, I don't want them to put their hands in because it's going to be really hard to clear them up, but they need to put their hands in, and if they want to, and to experience it. But at the same time as well, it might be an opportunity for them to overcome fears such as sticky fingers. After a while they might get used to that and not have such a fear of it anymore. If we keep doing all the sticky bits ourselves, then they're never going to overcome those fears. And it doesn't matter if it's a slightly manky looking pie that comes out the oven, because it's been the process and the exploring, maybe requesting more, initiating, tasting, smelling, feeling, listening, using switch work for mixers and microwaves. There are so many learning opportunities and experiences if we allow our students and the people we work with to be independent. It is something that can really be easily forgotten at times, but this is where we as staff teams can remind each other. And it is also, there's no shame in someone saying, I have no idea how this student I'm working with can join in with this session. To say to other staff members, does anybody have any ideas? Because often somebody will do, or someone will have done something a few weeks ago that had worked really well and then can try it again. So that is number 2, encouraging independence. Number 3, gaps and pauses. There is a massive temptation to fill in gaps and pauses with speaking, particularly when working with students who are non-verbal, and it might be that someone feels like that silence is a bit awkward and they need to say something or do something. However, it's vital that we don't, because often it can take a while for a request that we've made or something we're showing to be processed by the student and person we're working with. So with a gap and a pause, we're allowing them time to think about what they've just seen or what they're about to see, and eventually we're very likely to get a response. It again is such a simple thing, but so easy to forget about, particularly if you're sitting within a group of people, because often it's turn taking, and so you might be waiting for one student and having a gap or a pause to see how they're going to react to something or respond. But if a member of staff sitting over there suddenly starts talking to another member of staff, or even loudly to their student, then that person who's trying to process what you've just asked of them or what you're showing them will straight away be brought out of that, and the moment will have been lost. So it's so simple, but something that can so easily be forgotten. That is number 3, gaps and pauses. Number 4, keeping the flow. Now, keeping the flow is a bit like number 3, gaps and pauses. During sessions such as sensory story or a music and movement session between songs, it's vital that between each section there are the gaps and the pauses, and that is keeping the flow of the story by having the gaps and pauses in, rather than suddenly in the middle of one bit when we are maybe waiting for the monster to come out of the cave, or in that gap and we're all waiting. That moment is when students are building up anticipation, a sense of feeling of awe and wonder and discovery, and they're all starting to wonder what's going to happen. And we can create with silence, we can create that feeling. Or you could be whispering to the person you're working with, but be saying, what's going to happen? It's got very dark, hasn't it? But what is possibly even more powerful than that is just not saying anything at all. And this will really keep the flow of the story, rather than someone suddenly thinking of something and calling it across the classroom to somebody else, or saying, what time's your break? Or did you watch something on the television last night? Because they might be suddenly thinking about it, and because there's a silence, will suddenly think to say. And that's something that is so important we remember not to do. And I know it can be quite easy sometimes to do it, but we have to try and remember not to. So that's where it's really good to talk about the wow at the start of every new half term and with new members of staff, because it's not something that people necessarily realise they're even doing. By doing that, we really are encouraging students to have meaningful engagement, and a sensory story is of no use if in those special gaps people are chatting and talking. So that is number 4, keeping the flow. Number 5, bathroom. The time in the bathroom, other than for the obvious, is sometimes it's a really good chance for students to have a bit of time for communication, or it could be to have a bit of a sensory break and to move away from a busy, noisy classroom and to go away to the calm of the bathroom. So while personal care is being done, they can have that little break for themselves. It's certainly not the time for staff to have a break from the classroom, and if you've got 2 members of staff to start chatting about what they watched on telly last night, what they're planning for dinner that night, about a member of their family who was really annoying that morning, or any such thing like that, it could be tempting to have that conversation, but that is just really terrible and horrible for the person who's gone into the bathroom with you. So it's really important to remember that it is a huge opportunity for interaction for that person, a bit of proprioceptive awareness for them just to be and be calm. And you can still do chatting. You could say, oh, I watched a funny program last night, if you felt it was something relevant to the student, and you could tell them about it. So include them in your chat. And it's just a really, really important thing to remember, which I feel can be forgotten really easily, particularly maybe at the end of a long term and everyone's a bit tired and people are thinking, oh good, it's nice to get out of the noisy classroom, let's go in here, and oh, that's better, let's have a little chat while we're here. That's not what the bathroom is for, and there's plenty of other times in the day when those sort of chats can happen. So that is number 5, bathroom. Here we go. Number 6 is one-to-one time, focusing on the student. So we need to listen with our eyes as well as with our ears to our students' needs and how they might be communicating with us or responding to something. If we are not fully focused on our student, we might miss the tiniest of signs. So if maybe having a chat to the member of staff next to us, or even maybe chatting to the student who's working with someone else rather than the student who's sitting with us, we might miss those opportunities. There are obviously lots of times when it's nice to all mix up as a group and chat to each other, but if it's specific one-to-one work that you're doing or experiencing, then it's really, really valuable to fully focus all your attention on that one person. Again, something that everyone does do, but that can be forgotten sometimes without really thinking about it. So that is number 6, one-to-one, focusing on the student. Number 7, keep moving. There are days when we all feel a bit lethargic, a bit tired, might not have slept very well that night, or if it's in our school sometimes when the underfloor heating first comes on, everyone suddenly is like, oh, I feel really exhausted. There will always be days when we feel really tired, but unfortunately we can't really just sit and stop interacting with the student, because chances are they might be feeling a bit like that too, and will need extra support in engaging. So it might be that if we're doing a tap-pack session or story massage and you're sitting alongside a beanbag with a student, you wouldn't necessarily just do one side that you can reach and think, oh well, I can't reach that other side, so I'm just going to keep going up and down this side. You will need to actually get up and move around, and then you can do the other side as well, because that will really help with the students' body awareness of where they are. Otherwise they'll think they've only got one half of a body, and by doing that as well you're going to look a bit more energetic, which might put a bit more energy feeling into the student as well. And other times, like sing-song sessions, if you ever have a whole class or group sing-song session, might be sometimes you don't feel like doing the actions, or you might just be standing behind a wheelchair and singing, but it's so important to keep moving and get down in front of the wheelchair, make some eye contact, do the actions, and by doing that it will encourage anticipation, a sense of belonging for the student. They'll really feel involved, they will feel energised. You will probably end up starting to feel a bit more energised as well, because you will get more response from your student. So it's really, really worth remembering to always try and keep moving, even when you really don't feel like it. It makes such a huge difference to the student and their sense of well-being and participation and enjoyment. So that is number 7. Keep moving. Number 8 is feedback. There is always time for feedback, unless there's a pressing medical or bathroom issue, in which case then possibly students and staff will need to be excused. But at any other time, like if someone goes, oh no, we're getting a bit close to lunchtime, then we wait and we do feedback and listen as each staff member feeds back what the student has done that day. It's really important that we all listen in that point, and that is still part of the session. They might be telling us something that the person has done that's really good, and they'll be explaining it, and it's a real chance for the sense of belonging that is so valuable. And once they've had their feedback, and we can cheer and they can beam and feel really important. And it's good as well for staff to hear how another student has done or achieved, or what they didn't like, because they were hopefully focusing on their own student during the session. So it's really, really good, and to be able to check the progression. And important, if 2 members of staff are starting to move a student or going to get the hoist, and they're going to try and hoist someone else the chair while someone else is talking about that student, then again it might as well not be happening, because nobody will be paying any attention and they won't be able to focus on what's being said, and the student in question probably won't even realise that they're being spoken about. So that is number 8, feedback. Number 8 is teamwork. Teamwork is the most important thing that we could get right. So how we are as a team will impact the experiences that the students or people we're working with will have. And it is worth remembering that quite often what makes up a team is a variety of different people with different skills, different characters and personalities, and you might have some who are the really vivacious characters who might say everything that they think immediately. You might have some very quiet, calm characters who maybe might worry about something for a little bit, but then we'll sort it out later on. And you have all these mixtures of characters which aren't always necessarily going to see eye to eye all the time, but at the same time it's what makes a really lovely mixture of people to have working together for the students. And this is something that, again, maybe at the end of a long term people can start to get, and if they're not necessarily feeling eye to eye, it's really, really important that that does not impact the experience students are having in the classroom and maybe the rest of the staff team. So if 2 people have maybe fallen out, it's very, very important that that is dealt with in a professional manner, and it can be spoken about at the end of the day or first thing in the morning before students arrive, and after they've left. And we need to remember that it's not a bad thing that we might all be different, and we can help each other out. Everyone will have an area that they probably feel a bit more confident in and less so in others, and we can learn from each other. But what is not okay is if maybe a member of staff might start complaining about another member of staff when there is a student present. And I feel sometimes that that could happen, particularly where students are non-verbal. Some people might start to think, oh, they won't really notice what I'm saying, but that's not okay. And it is so important to remember the teamwork factor. And we are all in this profession working together very closely and day in, day out, often in one room, and there are quite often a lot of us all doing similar jobs. We potentially will tread on each other's toes at times, or might not agree with how someone else is doing something, but that is where we all need to remember the what's our why. Why are we here? Why do we do what we do? We do it because of the students and how much we can get out of working with them and how much they can get out of working with us. If we remember all of these things and the whole wow and how to be wow, what's our why, they're all really, really small little obvious things, but that just, it doesn't harm at all ever to regularly remind ourselves about them, because they are all things that can accidentally be forgotten at certain times. So number 9 is teamwork makes the dream work. Bit cheesy, but quite true. Number 10 is having fun. Very simple, but can be forgotten again at times, particularly when people are tired or not really fancying it, or it's the sensory story for the 7th time, and sometimes staff might start to find it a bit boring, which is fair enough if it keeps being repeated. However, you only have to look at the students to quite often see the longer you do a story for and the more you repeat it, the more they get out of it each week. So they might be really starting to realise there's a funny bit that's happening. Our last sensory story was about Japan, and one of our members of staff dressed up as a sumo wrestler with the big blow-up suit, and he burst out after a certain bit of music was played. By the end of the term that we'd been doing the story for, at least 2, possibly more, students were starting to laugh as that music played in anticipation of the enormous sumo wrestler about to burst out of the room. And it was really funny for all of us to see, and just great to see that anticipation and enjoyment they were getting out of the story. So we need to, even though it can feel like, oh, that story again, or oh, that same music session with the same songs, it's really, really important that we still look like we're loving it, because the more we look like we're loving it, the more our students are going to love it and will engage. It's, I find, a bit like watching a film with a friend, and you don't really want to watch the film, but you might want your friend still to enjoy their film, so you would sit and still try and look like you're enjoying the film, rather than maybe complaining about it every 5 minutes. Or I've found over the years playing with my children, it might be that the last thing I feel like doing is sitting and brushing teddy bears and dressing them up. I might far prefer to be doing something else, but you can see the absolute pleasure that your child has when you look like they think you're absolutely loving it. That applies to being with our students. So again, when you're doing sing-songs, if you're singing a song but like the Hokey Pokey, the more you put into that song, the more energy and eye contact, smiling, expressive faces and dancing, it is so noticeable how much more the students will also join in and smile, providing they like that song or that story. So it's really, really important just to keep having fun. It's also really nice when working with a team, and as people start to get tired, you can turn it around by, if you suddenly all start joining in and dancing with something. We did have a session on St Patrick's Day when we suddenly started doing river dance. We hadn't planned to, and it was a really lovely session in the end. But to start with, everybody felt a bit tired. By the end, we were all energised and laughing, and it really felt like a nice sense of being in a team, belonging, and that was including all the students as well, obviously. So it's just really important sometimes to, even if we're not feeling it, to try and appear like we're having fun, and more often than not, you will start having fun anyway. So that is my list of 10 wow reminders, and I really can't recommend highly enough how it can really help to start of each half term, or even more regularly, every other week, at the end of a Monday maybe, just to all sit round a table and have a little reminder, because they're all things that no one probably does intentionally and can still do though, and it's just a little reminder is all we need, and that will make such a difference for the students and help them get as much out of their days at our schools and care settings or at home that they possibly could. So thank you for listening, and goodbye.